Welcome back, Shadow and Flame followers. Now some of you are going to feel a little bit cheated with this video because a lot of you have already seen it before. The reason why we're doing it again is because before I teamed up with Kev to form Shadow and Flame, I had my own YouTube channel under my own name. To be honest, there wasn't a lot on it. Only 3 videos, all relating to the same thing, and that was how to construct and put together the Great Beast of Gorgoroth from Games Workshop. Basically what I'm doing is, because it's SPG related and there's nothing else on my old channel, I'm just uploading it to the Shadow and Flame site to keep everything all together basically. A little bit of history about the Great Beast. It was quite a late model to come out. I'm not sure when, I think it was about 2010 of the Lord of the Rings range. It was quite early on though in the history of Games Workshop's Finecast releases, and was quite notoriously bad for holes and alignment issues. It was my first real experience with resin. I've always worked with plastics and metals. So I sort of approached it with an open mind and found that it wasn't really as bad as everyone was making out. And there were a lot of complaints about it because Games Workshop eventually redesigned the way it went together to try and avoid some of the issues that were so common in the initial phase. Right, now this was the first YouTube video that I ever made, so bear that in mind when you watch it. If you think my current videos are bad, you just wait till you see this one. But nevertheless, it's still helpful, I think, especially if you pick up one of the older Great Beasts that go together in the way that this one does, or even if you've picked up one of the newer versions with the the separate legs and the body cast in one piece. There'll still be bits and pieces that you can benefit from. Especially when you combine it with the 2 videos that follow this one, which will be a lot more relevant. Alright, so if you've seen it before, check it out again. It's a good video, a bit long. Everything's real time, just so you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, enjoy. Okay, today we're going to look at Games Workshop's Great Beast of Gorgoroth model from their Lord of the Rings range. Now this is a great looking model, but it's notoriously difficult to put together because of its infamous misalignment issues. Hopefully this video will show you how we can get around that with just a little bit of work, and we can get from this to the fully assembled model looking reasonably good. Well, we're going to need certain tools to get the job done. Obviously we've got our Great Beast model itself in the box. We've got a craft knife for cutting away sprue and scraping mould lines. We've got some clay shapers for adding putty later, and also a sculpting tool, a steel one. It's just got a blade on one end and a small spoon on the other. We've got some needle files. They're going to help us clean up any bits that we don't need. I've got my pin vise, and that's got a 1mm drill bit inserted from my drill bit case here, and that's going to make room for metal pins, because we'll be doing a bit of pinning later too. We've got some elastic bands which are going to hold together the 2 halves of the beast itself when it's gluing, and also during the reshaping process. Clippers for taking the individual components off the sprues. I've got my super glue for actually fixing the model together. Okay, I've got some Vaseline, which is a lubricant, so that my tools, my sculpting tools, don't stick to the modelling putty. And the putty I'm going to be using is Procreate. It's just my personal favourite. You can use green stuff or any other media that you feel comfortable using. Another good addition that you might want to pick up is liquid green stuff. I don't actually have any of that, but I've heard good things about it, and it's useful for filling in small bubble holes. Okay, but we're going to have to make do because I don't have any, so that's not a problem. Right, so if we open up the box, first thing we need to do is check the contents. We've got an assembly guide that just shows you how it all goes together. Fairly straightforward. The hardest bit is getting the pieces to actually line up. So we'll move on to that later. Okay, and we've got all our sprues. We've got the two halves of the beast. Okay, we'll just check. We've got all our orcs, so there should be 10 of these altogether. You want to make sure they're all there. Okay, so, and they're all different. So they're all there. We've got the front of the halder, the rear, and the sides. Okay, and also the base, but we'll put that to one side for the minute. Okay, so at this point you just want to inspect and check the quality of the casts. Looking for any obvious holes or misshapes. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. This side's okay, got all the teeth. That's a common problem. Sometimes you'll find the teeth are missing on these beasts. Okay, we've got a thin area here. Don't know if you can make that out, just in the leg crease, where the Finecast is really thin, so that'll need filling out a bit later. Okay, the tail's there. Sometimes the tail's missing, but this one at first glance doesn't look too bad. Okay, right, this one is pretty thin again. I don't know if you can see that, where the Finecast is so thin you can see right through the bottom of it. That's going to need patching up. Also, one of the spikes, that's broken, and again on the top one as well. So we've got a couple of spikes that are going to need fixing, but that's not too much of a problem. And you can see how flat the angle is on these pieces. That's definitely not going to line up, so we're going to have to do a bit of reshaping there later too. Okay, you can see all the flash. That's all going to need to be taken away, but we'll do that on the next stage. On this front piece of the halder itself, you've got two heads hanging down. That's quite a common problem to find those missing. I'll show you what I mean from a different one. Like here's one from another box, and you can see the two heads are missing completely. They're not even loose in the box, which is a bit of a nuisance. You can live without it, obviously, or you can perhaps add some in from, if you've got some from the troll kit, for instance, or you can take it back and demand a new one, because you want all the pieces that are supposed to be in your kit actually in your kit. Okay, that's fine. The The orcs themselves don't look too bad, apart from one that I can spy. We've got the bottom end of the bow's missing on this one. Other than that, doesn't seem too bad. Also the finger, this one's supposed to be pointing, but there's no index finger, it just looks like a closed fist. So we can add a finger in later as well. It's not too much of a problem, just an inconvenience really. So that's the kit. I'm happy that there's not too many issues that's going to cause us problems. Obviously, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have all these miscasts and bits missing. But as I say, this kit is renowned for having its problems. So what we're going to do in the next stage is take away all these bits of flesh and moulded areas that we don't need, and clean up the two halves of the beast itself and check for alignment. Okay, so that's what we'll do next. Right, for this stage we've got our clippers, knife and files, and it's just simply a case of getting rid of all these pieces that we don't need. Okay, obviously you need to be a little bit careful that you don't cut away anything you're not supposed to. These chunkier bits I use to take off with the cutters here. Smaller bits we can take off with the knife. Be careful, don't snip away that chain by mistake. Okay, there's a piece in here, I always forget about this piece. There's a little bit right inside where the horn fits in. Sometimes that can be a problem. You see, that's not going to go in there, so that needs to come out. Yeah, didn't do a very good job of that, so I'm going to go in. Okay. Obviously be very careful when you're using knives. I've had too many accidents to count really, but it is a hazard of the hobby, but nonetheless you should be vigilant whenever you're using sharp blades. Okay, that's a bit better. Just going to shave a bit off of there. Okay, that's going to be okay, I think, in a minute. Some of these thinner pieces, I don't know, can you see that? They're going to have to come off. Nice and gentle. It's fairly easy to cut this Finecast. Just a little bit at a time, don't overdo it. Okay, now these bits on the bottom, you can see big air bubble there, and smaller ones too. We're not going to worry too much about that because they're going to be on the bottom of the feet, which is going to be fixed to the base. But if they were in the actual the body of the beast itself, obviously we'd have to do something about that. But I don't think we've got too many of those. I'll have a closer look when it's all cleaned up. So basically I'm going to get on with this. These little mould lines, they can be taken out just by keeping the blade perpendicular to the model and just scraping it away. Okay, eventually you get to the stage where the line completely disappears. Okay, so that's what we call shaving. So I'm quite happy with that. And we're going to carry on and go around the rest of the model, clean up all these mould lines same way, so that'll get shaved off right down the legs here. And when you rejoin me, that'll all be cleaned up. So that's all it is. It's basically cutting away the big pieces of sprue with the clippers and shaving away the mould lines with the hobby knife. So leave me to get on with that, and we'll come back in a minute when it's all done. Right, so we've cleaned up all those mould lines in the previous stage, and all that sprue's gone. I mean, this half I noticed is worse than the other one regarding bubbles. You can probably just make those out. Yeah, there's a couple of tiny little bubble holes. There's quite a big one on the underside of the leg here, but fillable. The liquid green stuff, if you had any, would probably take care of these small ones, but the bigger one is going to need some more attention with the Procreate, which we'll do later on. So anyway, so now we've cleaned them up as best we can. It comes time for a test fit. Now there's 3 locating holes and 3 lugs, which ideally should go together. Sometimes you can get 2, sometimes you can get 3, but this one needs a bit of persuasion. Yeah, so that's quite tight, and the only way that's going to stay there in that position is if we use some elastic bands. So I'm going to do, see, it's popped out again already. Okay, that one's in pretty good. Put one around the middle. Okay, it doesn't matter too much where it goes. Might be, I'll just put one around the back end. Probably don't need to, but won't do any harm. Okay, so that's now tight. Now all the lugs are in where they should be. You can still see, obviously, we've got some gaps. At the end, you've got quite a big step in the face. The reason for that is because I think when this model was designed, it should be looking to his right, and I'll explain that, how we can get those two parts aligned just by bending them round slightly. Same principle really as on a road. Obviously the outside edge is a lot longer than the inside edge, although they both start and end in the same place. So that's the same thing we're going to be looking for with our great beast. As we bend the head round, the longer side will align up with the shorter side. Okay. Now obviously it's too hard to bend on its own, so we need to soften it up, and the best way to do that is with some hot water. This is some I boiled maybe 10 minutes ago, so it's cooled down a little bit. It doesn't have to be boiling hot. This is just a piece of sprue. I'll just show you what happens if you just leave it in the water for a few seconds. Okay. Yeah, that hard sprue has gone really flexible, and you'll find, just do that again. Yeah, I mean, you can really play with it. Okay, and as that cools, that should retain its shape. Okay, I mean, it's still a little bit warm, so it's coming undone slightly. You can speed up the process by running it under a cold tap. But anyway, that's what we're going to be doing with our beast. So we're going to dip him in. Yeah, and don't use boiling hot water, because that will scald your hands for a start, and you also got a danger of the details in the model becoming softer themselves, which you don't want. Okay, so that's been in a few seconds. So now, yeah, you can see it as I bent that round. That's coming into line nicely. Okay, and the middle too. The elastic bands are pulling in, closing that gap up. Okay, if anything, see what I've done there is the leg has pulled down, so what I'm going to do is take those off and do it again. Okay, because that's pulled that whole leg in, which I didn't want to happen. Yeah, so now I've ended up with a big ridge there where I didn't have one before. Okay, so a bit overkill on the elastic bands there. The good thing is you can do this as many times as you need to until you're happy that you've got it right. Okay, so now I can bend that back in there. Okay, head's coming round. Can be a bit fiddly. And you just want to hold that in place best you can. Almost need 4 hands. Obviously, the better you can get this aligned, the less filling you're going to need to do in the next stage. Okay, it's looking fairly good. Okay, you can feel it slowly starting to harden up again. Okay, if you're happy with your alignment, like I said, you can just go under and run that quickly under the cold tap rather, and that'll instantly stiffen it right up into where you've got it at the moment. So I'm going to go away and do that, and then we'll be back to see the results shortly. So that's been under the cold tap. It's all nice and cold and rigid again, and you'll see how well those shut lines have closed up. Okay, there's still very slight gaps there, but much more manageable for when we come to do the gap fill. Okay, underside. Yeah, and you can see now that we've got that nice curved shape. Yeah, so he's looking round to the right. That has sorted out that step in the front very nicely. Okay, that's almost spot on. Okay, so I'm happy with that. It's yeah, goes together fine. Be nice if it came like that in the box, but be realistic, that's not likely to happen. So just a case of gluing the two halves together now. So I'll take my super glue. Okay, there's a liberal amount right round one half of the beast. I'm using this handy little dispenser which it came with. Get a lot more control on the tube itself, so it's a lot easier to control the flow. Okay, so I'm just going to stick those two together. Yeah. Okay. Now, when you're squeezing them together, you get any squirting out through the gaps themselves, which I'm surprised we haven't actually, because that's normally what happens. It's a good idea to just wipe that away, because when it dries, that can cause you problems, because it'll go hard, and you'll have to file it away, or make do with it. And the last thing you want to do when you come to painting it at the end is realise you've got a big blob of dried super glue that you never saw was there, because obviously it dries clear. Yeah. Now these, you can see I've still got a very tiny a raised edge on one of these halves. I could have put it back in the water and tried to get it a bit more perfect, but I'm not too fussed, because I've got to get the putty out anyway and fill in all these big bubbles. So I'll sort that out with either another shave probably, and then some putty to disguise it. Okay, so that's that. Next stage is to disguise the joins and fill in any gaps. So what I've done, I've shaved that raised edge away a little bit more to disguise it, but obviously we're still going to need to sort these gaps out. So I'm going to take my putty, my Procreate, which is got a stick of resin, stick of hardener, cut away a little bit of each, and just like most of the epoxies, it's just a case of kneading it together until you get a nice uniform colour. I'll just take a couple of minutes. You can see the colours start to transform. You've got the white stick and the dark grey. Obviously you're going to end up with a nice light grey colour throughout. Okay, it's just stretching and squeezing until you've got that nice uniform colour in theory. Okay, good enough. So let's move that out of the way. You want to get rid of any shavings or dust that you might have on the mat, because you don't want lumps of it in your putty in a minute. So what I'm going to do is just roll that out, get a nice thin line. This is. And this is going to go follow the seam where the two halves join together. Okay, don't have to do it all in one go. I've gone a bit thin there, so I'll get rid of that bit. Use that in a minute. Okay. I think what we'll do is just take a little bit to start with. Okay, and we're just going to start underneath the horn there. And to start with, I'm going to use the metal tool. Need some lube. Okay. Okay, that's just, don't need too much on there, just enough to make it so the putty doesn't stick to the metal tool. Okay, and all you're doing, I'm just going to stick that in along there. And follow it round. Okay, might have a little bit too much there, but we'll disguise that in a second. So it's just a case of working it into the gap. Nice and slow, methodical. Okay. Now, this is where I liked it. Oh, I'm just going off camera there, so I apologise. I like using clay shapers. I've got two. I've got a cone tip, which is okay for working. You can see it's flexible on the end, so especially when you're doing natural elements like skin or cloth, anything that flows and requires a softer edge. Yeah, it's hard to get that with the metal tools, because obviously they're a lot less forgiving and end up a lot harsher looking. Okay, so just working that in. Trying to disguise where all the edges of the putty meet the model. You want that piece really thin. Okay, so that's working along. If needs be, you can add texture or lines. I'm just going to switch to my what do you call this? Wedge shape clay shaper. It's handy because it's got a pointy tip which you can just poke in and get a little bit deeper than the cone, or you can use the flat edge for spreading. So I'm a real big fan of these clay shapers. I don't think, especially in more recent times, I've done a sculpt where I haven't actually used it at some point. Okay, so the bit that's left, that can work up the neck. See, along that join there. Okay. You just squash it down to start with. So what I'm going to do, go back to the metal tool. Just got some on there. Okay, just flatten it right down. If anything, I've used too big a sausage of putty here. It's not the end of the world there, because it's just more effort to get it blended in. Obviously the smaller sausage you've got of putty, that is, to work in, then the easier it is, and you can use that. You really gotta drag that putty away from the join into the skin, pushing down. There's quite a lot of pressure required to get it seamless almost. And do the same thing on the other side. You're just trying to follow all those contours that unfolds in the skin and dragging the putty away. Yeah, you can end up with little bits inevitably, but you can just take those off. Let's get those folds back in there. We can add some skin texture going over the neck. Squish that out a bit more. Because what you don't want to do is when you turn it sideways, see a big ridge where your putty has met your model, because there's really no point in adding the putty because you already had a ridge there in the first place. You don't want to add another one. So it's all about dragging it away, firm pressure, and just following the entire model along the seam, working its way around. I'm going to do that in a minute, but what I'll do first is just show you how we get around the bubbles. Okay, so lots on here. I'll move that because that's sort of messing up the focus. So I've made a little ball. Well, not quite a ball. We'll put it on that one. So okay, so just squash it into the bubble and then as before just pull the edges away and into the body of the model itself. Okay, so that's all it is. Fairly straightforward. Same thing with that big hole. Okay, it's just a case of just trying to pick it up. Use my finger. Right. So put it over the hole. Bit of pressure. Okay. Because it's in the crease there, I'm just going to use my cone just to get the right shape. And because of the flexibility, it doesn't push it right into the hole. It just fills it up nicely. So I've got the basic shape there, and I can just pull the rest away with the metal tool, which requires a little bit of a negotiation because of where it is. It's just a case of changing angles with the tool, or using a different tool even. You know, I'll just use this one as an example because it's my personal favourite, but I mean, they're all different types of steel tools available for different jobs. But so that's that unsightly hole in the lead crease gone. We got rid of one of the bubbles, and we filled in around the horn there. What I'm going to do is just go right round and fill in the rest of the gaps. So we'll catch up with it there. So there you see, I've completely gone round the whole of the join with the Procreate putty. You might be able to make out, you know, there's some lines, textured lines been marked in for skin texture. All helps to give the illusion that there was no join there in the first place. Gone right under the belly. A lot of that big bubble that we had there. Do you remember? That's gone. That's full up. So I'm pleased with that. So that's the beast pretty much done. So next stage is to move on and build the howdah.